News! Okay, we'll start with this. You may have heard that IBF Super Flyweight champion Willibaldo Garcia has dropped out of title defense against Kenshiro Teraji. The ring's Knight of the Samurai has lost some firepower. Willibaldo Garcia has fallen ill and is out of his IBF title defense against Kenshiro Teraji. On Saturday, after he wasn't cleared by the commission, Garcia was set to make the first defense of his IBF title at the Mohammed Abdo Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The card is headlined by Naoya Inoue defending his undisputed super bantamweight crown against Alan Picasso on DAZN. No, not just DAZN. DAZN pay-per-view. Garcia's manager, Sean Gibbons, told The Ring he fell ill after eating following the weigh-in. Garcia, 23-6 with 2 draws and 13 knockouts, weighed in at 114 pounds for the fight. Everything was great, Gibbons said. This morning, Willibaldo made weight fantastic, then did the second day ceremony, and everything was great. I don't know what he had, but his stomach wasn't feeling good, so I went to have his stomach checked, and he's not feeling great. That's it. The IBF has a rehydration clause that doesn't allow fighters to weigh more than 10 pounds above their weight class on the morning of the fight. The two fighters had yet to conduct the second day weigh-in before Garcia wasn't cleared to fight. Garcia won the IBF Super Flyweight title in his last fight via split decision over previously unbeaten Rene Calixto in a May 23rd rematch. Garcia and Calixto had fought to a split draw for the then-vacant IBF title last year. Teraji was set to make his super flyweight debut. Teraji had long been one of boxing's best at the lower weights and held world titles at junior fly and fly. Teraji, 33, is coming off of a split decision loss to WBC flyweight champion Ricardo Sandoval on July 30th. It's unknown if Teraji will face another opponent on Saturday. Now let's be clear that even though Kenshiro Teraji and Willibaldo Garcia are not that well known among American boxing fans, it still hurts the marketability of this card that one of the title fights is now not going to happen for what is already a tough sell at what? 4 or 5 in the morning? A pay-per-view? It was veteran boxing scribe Stephen Kimothy who said it best. I guess like many of you guys, I'm looking forward to seeing Inoue and Nakatani ply their trade, but for the first time in years, I'll be paying extra for it in the form of pay-per-view. As IQ News has pointed out, in the past, their fights came as part of a regular subscription. So I'll ask again, is this progress? And I would say no. It really doesn't help the marketability of this card that Teraji versus Garcia isn't happening. But in a very general sense, this entire card, as good as it might be to the hardcores, the people who actually know these fighters, still doesn't belong behind a paywall. Americans do not traditionally follow the lower weights, so asking them to pay extra to see fighters that many of them are not familiar with save the guy in the main event. Stupid. Especially when we used to see a good number of these guys at no additional charge. What's supposed to be the appeal of the DAZN Ultimate Tier, you get this fight at no additional charge when all that really is taking something we didn't used to pay for, charging us for it now, then saying we can save money on those charges by kicking out more money. Because either way, it costs the consumer more money to either see the fight as a singular event or to subscribe to this Ultimate Tier, and it's not progress. To answer Steve Kim's question, is boxing moving in the right direction with these kinds of business practices? And I would say no, because boxing, like any other sport, is at its biggest when it's most accessible to the consumer, and you're not doing that, putting guys behind a paywall that weren't behind one before. You think Americans are going to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, then kick out $44 to see these guys fight? They barely know them. The core audience for these fighters is in the Far East, is in Japan. If you want to charge them extra for it, that would make a lot more sense, but the Americans and the Brits... That's just stupid. I suppose that the silver lining is that if While Ubaldo Garcia is not fighting Kenshiro Teraji this weekend, he can still have another big fight with Bam Rodriguez, provided they move into negotiations to do that next year. And they might.
Undisputed.
I don't even think Will Ubaldo was going to win that fight this weekend. He already has 6 losses to lesser fighters than a Kenshiro Teraji. And if he fights Bam, it'll be the same thing, but it is his only out for a meaningful fight now that he's a champion. So, maybe that happens. In the realm of meaningful fights, tensions skyrocket between Junto Nakatani and Naoya Inoue entering Ring 5. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, pound-for-pound star Junto Nakatani is a 3-weight world champion and one of the most exciting fighters in the sport. On Saturday, the hard-hitting Japanese southpaw will look to impress once again when he makes his junior featherweight debut against Sebastian Hernandez at the Mohamed Abdo Arena in the co-main event of Ring 5. In June, Nakatani unified a division for the first time when he stopped countryman and WBA bantamweight champion Ryosuke Nishida in 6 rounds in what was a brutal display of accurate power punching. Big Bang defended his WBC title and also added the vacant Ring Magazine title to his growing collection. Nishida was aggressive and came to fight. Nakatani told the Ring via a translator, "I expected that from him. It was predictable, so I was more aggressive in that fight too." Winning the Ring Magazine title championship was a big honor. That was a huge motivation for me because it proved that I was the best bantamweight in the world. I won that belt, and now it's on to the next step at 122. The move north brings Nakatani one step closer to a mouth-watering, undisputed title clash against compatriot and fellow pound-for-pound sensation Naoya Inoue. Except for an appearance on the Mr. Versace podcast, both men have been largely kept at a distance here in Riyadh. Whenever Inoue and Nakatani are in the same room, there is no communication, no acknowledging each other's presence, and you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. Both fighters' crosshairs locked on. Alternate targets this weekend. Neither man will discuss the potential super fight in depth. Perhaps that's a bit of superstition on both parts, that you don't want to look too far past the man that's in front of you, lest you grow distracted. Junto's got to deal with Sebastian. Naoya has to deal with Allen. Even if everybody knows that this is just an appetizer to the main course between them, you have to focus up. You have to focus on what's in front of you. The mere mention of Inoue's 6th defense of the undisputed crown against Mexico's Alan Picasso was met with a steely response from Junto. "Right now, I'm only focused on Sebastian," said Nakatani after shaking his head. "I don't care about that fight." Nakatani, 27, spent less than 2 years in the bantamweight division and stopped all 5 of his opponents inside the distance. At 5'8", he's extremely tall for the lower weights, so this recent step up has felt like a natural progression. And naturally, I imagine, not cutting down to 118, now fighting at 122, he will arrive at the weight even stronger. Moving up in weight and whatever carries over is not the same for everyone. It's not an exact science. Some fighters move up and they lose their power, where some other fighters, they actually grow stronger because of their physical dimensions and having more room to build. Everything is good in terms of weight, speed. Everything has been great for me at 122, Nakatani said before acknowledging that the weight cut is still significant. "It's not really possible for me to do additional strength and conditioning work because you gain weight naturally in training camp. We've been doing the same things, hitting the bag, shadowboxing, and sparring." And what about Nakatani's next assignment? Hernandez, who hails from Tijuana, has scored 18 knockouts and 20 straight wins, but remains largely undistinguished. The 25-year-old brawler's best win on paper was a 10-round UD over Azat Crazy A Havanesian in July. Hernandez has a lot of power and a lot of knockouts, said Nakatani. "I'm just focused on the game plan and will follow that game plan from the opening bell. We're the same height and the same weight, so I won't have to box and move the whole fight. What he does is predictable, so I'll be ready for him. Nakatani is already one of the most accomplished fighters in boxing, and 2026 could bring a legacy-defining moment against Inoue. However, this amiable Japanese warrior has long-term goals beyond punch-swapping with the monster. I will continue my journey step by step, said Nakatani, before putting the higher divisions on notice. Right now, it's junior featherweight. Then it will be 126 and 130. I am motivated to become the best pound for pound. Inoue is a more accomplished fighter than Junto Nakatani in every way you can imagine, except that he's not built for 126 and 130 like Junto is. Even though Junto is a fighter who's moving up from the lower weights, his physical dimensions are a lot more generous, and he's better suited to fight at featherweight than Inoue is. Even if Inoue beats him? Perhaps, because if the fight between them happens next year and Inoue emerges the victor, there won't actually be much reason for Junto to stay at 122, since in that situation, Inoue would still have all the belts. So what are you going to do? What are you going to fight for? In that situation, he might move up to where Junto's campaign at 122 may not last long. A fight of some historical significance, and certainly one of the very best fights to make in modern boxing today, though oddly enough, there are still some boo-birds and some critics. They're not excited. I came across a headline that really chapped my ass from Boxing News 24, one of the more opinionated rags within the boxing space, as most of the pieces are opinion pieces. One in particular I came across, why Inoue versus Espinosa resonates more with US fans than Nakatani. They're poo-pooing on the Nakatani fight. They are, in favor of the Rafael Espinosa fight on the premise that Americans might be more interested in that than in Nakatani. But I would ask, how interested are Americans in Rafael? How interested are they really? Is he a big draw here? Is he popular? You're saying this because he's a fighter of Mexican descent, and I understand that, but even with that, how much of a draw is Rafael here? Is he as well known in America as either Junto or Inoue are in Japan? Is Inoue versus Espinosa in the United States what Inoue versus Nakatani is in Japan? No fucking way. No, sir. And if it's Rafael Espinosa's aim to generate interest in America, like what Boxing News 24 is arguing, perhaps he should unify his division instead of sitting on his hands waiting for smaller fighters to move up, especially when he's so big for his own weight. To the point where it's almost ridiculous to have a guy 6'2" campaigning at 126? So what annoyed me about the article is Americans now have a penchant for arguing about fights that aren't even made while shitting on the ones that are, except in this particular instance, Inoue versus Nakatani is a whale of a fight. It's a monster to the Japanese, and their money is just as green as mine or yours. So why would you poo-poo on that for this? American exceptionalism. In a manner of speaking, the focus is generating interest in America, but I reiterate that if Rafael wants to do that, there are 2 or 3 other champions at his weight that he could have and should have fought by now. How hard is he trying to generate interest with that? That you're just sitting around waiting on smaller fighters to move up. Been doing that for over a year now. It doesn't actually matter which one of these 2 fights resonate with Americans, because one of these fights is many times bigger than the other. So big, who needs the Americans, who don't traditionally watch 122 or 126 that much anyway? The time for pandering to an American audience has long since passed. It's over. America's not the only place for a boxer to make big money, and Inoue is proof. So while Boxing News 24 tries to mull over which fight they think the Americans would like more, who fucking cares what the Americans think? They don't buy shit anyway. A lot of the time, they don't buy their own fighters' fights. So they're gonna buy this one? We now turn our attention to the recently announced undercard for the Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson fight set to go down early next year. Analyzing some of the fights, Bruce Carrington will be facing Carlos Castro for the recently vacated WBC title. It doesn't satisfy what people want to see from Bruce. They want to see Bruce in there with somebody good, one of the real killers and gorillas at his weight, and Carlos Castro doesn't fit that mold. Not that it's Bruce's fault, because it isn't. I don't see any of the champions at 126 in a hurry to give Bruce a shot, so he's got to make do however he can, and he's doing that fighting Carlos for the WBC title. Maybe when he becomes a champion himself, the other champions might be more receptive to fighting him. We'll see. Keyshawn Davis's ring return, and his super lightweight debut opposite the ring, Jermaine Ortiz. For a number of weeks now, Jermaine's name has been attached to a potential fight with Richardson Hitchens, IBF champion. What happened, if I had to guess? In Richardson Hitchens going back to Matchroom to be promoted by them, he decided that this fight was more trouble than it's worth, and perhaps decided not to have it. Enter Keyshawn Davis, who I'd rather see fight over Richardson Hitchens 7 days out of 7. He's making his 140-pound debut, and he's been out of the ring for a while. Jermaine Ortiz has the ability to present a pesky style, moving and pot-shotting from the outside, like what he did with Teofimo Lopez, fighting negative. He could do that with Keyshawn, and with the added inactivity that Keyshawn hasn't fought in a while, and he's new to the weight, the potential is there for Keyshawn to look bad. I hope that he's motivated, and I hope that he wants to make a splash. I hope that he trains that way, because there are some concerns. And not just that, this is going to be his first fight without Bo Brian McIntyre in his corner. Remember that Keyshawn has given his training team a complete makeover, so I don't know how he's going to look moving forward. You also have WBC middleweight champion Carlos Adames making his second appearance on one of Turki El Sheikh's shows after the controversial outcome with Hamza Shiraz, the draw that some people think should have been a win for Carlos. He's fighting Amo Williams, and I like the fight. I've seen Amo in action for a number of years on Matchroom shows. He still is a Matchroom fighter. I don't really know if he wins this fight because Amo doesn't strike me as a finished product. Now, both boys, the challenger and the champion alike, have one loss apiece. Carlos's loss years ago to Patrick Teixeira, and Amo's more recent knockout loss to Hamza Shiraz, which he has since rebounded from. This fight is intriguing because the outcome to it isn't quite clear. Even if you think that Carlos is the better fighter and has been in there with better fighters, he's also coming off a lengthy stint of inactivity. He hasn't boxed since the Shiraz fight. Is Amo Williams the right guy and the right fight for Carlos to be shaking off ring rust in? I'm not sure. Big gravy! Jarrell Miller will be facing Kingsley eBay. Big gravy! Big hungry. In what will be his first fight since the draw with Andy Ruiz that a lot of people think should have been a win in the column for Jarrell Miller, as he clearly outworked Andy, outsized Andy, to me, outfought Andy, barreling forward and putting pressure on him. This could also be his first fight under the Matchroom banner, since he's said to have gone back to doing business with them. What do I think about the card? Overall, it's solid. It's a good-looking card. Happening the same day as Xander Zayas versus Abbas Baru. Needless to say that they're giving Xander a lot to compete with here, and we'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches.